Philosophers talk to our times towards an ethnography of a self-poisoning mind. It is one of those queer things. I mean, humans' inability to understand what they're doing and their own inability to understand how they're going to destroy what they value themselves most for. I guess their civilization, through not caring. And in this, I feel all people of my age and my social class, almost caste, I think, owe a great responsibility. Because we failed. I'm going to be absolutely honest about it. We failed in a task that was handed to us. Let me explain, or try to. Back in the middle of last century and at the beginning, the wars taught great lessons in death. And you get in Germany and then in France great philosophers able to try to understand what destruction looked like, trying to understand what it meant to live in the kind of world where holocausts could happen. But more than just holocausts. It's the First World Wars and atom bombs. And they were very good at it. The profound shock animates Heidegger, animates... good name's gone. It'll come back to me. Habermas, not Habermas, anyway, it'll come back to me. The negative dialectic, Adorno. I knew I'd get it in the end. And all the philosophers that I love, the Derridas and the Deleuze's and the Foucaults of this world. So that they were very good at giving you ways to think and to understand what that kind of death meant. Foucault in particular, I always felt, was a supreme philosopher of giving you different non-hackneyed ways to think about dying in a world beyond the soul. There's a lovely piece, very challenging. I think it's just as he begins to know that he's got AIDS in 1983 or 4, about his death, about how death sets you free, which I said is challenging. And I've always understood it as when you are dead, you're no longer tied to having to be you. You become those pure celestial thoughts under a species of eternity that can dance into the mind of others and shift and change. That the thing that was most precious about you was always your ability to take up and to change the world. And that is freed by death, because that is what is left. That becomes what you are. It's beautiful, it's challenging. It makes you have to rethink what it is to be human at all. And in this world where it is absolutely true that humans are about to get the payback from the fact that they're not very good at doing what Foucault is saying there is the essence of freedom. I mean, thinking of the world beyond them, beyond their own individual death, understanding how it could set you free, understanding then your effects forever dancing amongst others, and not just human actors. How you're then caught up in a world which you cannot actually comprehend, but that is comprehended, changed, forced into a different rhythm by your very existence. Humans have been very bad since the war. And not necessarily at understanding that, but really at getting it out as an idea that will allow us to understand how we really are dancing around the rim of our own utter destruction. I mean, you can see it in the reporting of fires in France here. They're reported, absolutely. And they're reported as these great, big, dramatic events. They're fundamentally going out now, just in case the British or American media have forgotten to say that. And there's this, oh my God, this is the future. We now live in the burning age. As if it was an epoch of time. Almost as if we could do nothing about it, but just manage the endless fire and the risk. And yes, people say, well, it's all global warming, isn't it? But that sounds as if it's something neutral, natural, something we can't do about in our everyday lives. Something that almost just hurts us, but doesn't really concern us. And understanding then how humans' failure to take responsibility of the Holocaust that they have let loose on the world is one of those interesting, very sad ideas. Because our governments certainly have. And as we are responsible for our governments, we certainly have. And one of the things I'm hardest on myself for, I think, is that I'm part of that, in the sense that all my adult life, I have been aware of this. Yes, I have done my little bit, but my God, it's been little. And as a generation, we've been much more happy to write shock drop pieces or sit and just look shocked at the world as the slow Holocaust built. And it wasn't through want of being taught about such things when I was a child. I was born 1969. So in 1969, Britain was still caught up in two great forces. My childhood was full of war stories. My father could easily remember the Second World War, absolutely straightforwardly. And my great uncles all fought in it. So I'm that kind of generation. And so it was there in my childhood. And it was there in two great strains. When you were young, you learned the boy's own stuff. And the problem was that stuck. And then later on, we did endless stuff on the First World War and the Second and the Holocaust and all that stuff. And you learnt about it. You learnt about it as a historical thing, a horror that happened. Something that must never, ever happen again. But looking back at the way we teach it, we cannot teach what is actually true. And we don't even point it out. The point about the Holocaust was its very unthinkability. That it could not be thought because it emerges within time. And once it's there, it feels like it was always inevitable. You look at the fact that the only thing that holds Hitler's sanity together is his anti-Semitism, and you go, well, there's a man who was thinking about the Holocaust from the beginning, and maybe he was thinking about it as a possibility. But what it was grew in the face of the defeat of Germany. What it was grew in the defeat of Stalin, in the defeat of the Operation Barbarossa. It grew then in the horror of war. And they're thinking, well, at least I can. It grew then in having power over millions of people, just as you're beginning to lose power. It grew then in an utter mad circumstance. And of course, it was unthinkable. It was unthinkable given the vibrancy of the Jewish life before the Second World War. And so, because it was unthinkable, that meant it could be done. In the blindness, the horror spread and spread and gathered a momentum of its own. And it's very unplanned. It's very gatheringness. Gatheringness, is that, can I use that phrase? The sense that it gathered in its own horror and pulled itself its own event, pulled to itself in its own event, and then broke like hell upon the earth that gave it its unique power. Now, I'm using unique in a particular way. All such horrors are unique. But of course, the British Empire at the same time was starving folk in India. That was a unique horror of its own, in its own, as well. It wasn't isolated. It was just uniquely horrible, as they are all uniquely horrible, as all such acts are uniquely horrible. But we were taught it, you see, in school. You can hear it coming in there. I was taught it as this one unique, horrible event that must never happen again. At the same time, I don't know about you, but in my school in England in the 1970s, we were a bit proud about how we had pulled back from our empire. Half my textbooks actually were reprinted in the early 1960s and certainly still talked about the British Empire. Strange, isn't it? So that we had to be told when we were reading our book that that bit was no longer true. Britain no longer owned that bit, but that was a good thing. And at the end, in the 1960s, and when I was in school in the 1970s, Britain felt very good, looking at France, which didn't do that, and the way it pulled back from Africa, and the spirit of change blew through Africa. And I think it was that complacency that blinded the country so badly, because it meant that we felt that we'd done something right. And all the 200 years or whatever it was, Africa, perhaps only 75, that had run before it, from the scramble to Africa, from the first trading posts through the scramble to Africa, to owning all of East Africa, enforcing slavery and farms, all the starvation in India, all that was forgotten. Somehow it didn't matter. It happened somewhere else. It was all unthinkable now, wasn't it? And looking back on the way I was taught to make such horrible events unthinkable to my life, on the grounds that if I made them unthinkable, then I would make sure that they never happened again. And of course, I hope you've got the irony there straight away. The point is that it was their unthinkability that allows them to happen again. And so that creates this great trope within the English-speaking Western world, I mean the wealthy bit of it, where we use unthinkability as a way both to render something impossible, to say that's never really going to happen, is it? But also to render it more likely, because perhaps it already has. Perhaps the massacres that the British Empire was part of has already happened. And that unthinkability is what I feel my generation of philosophers and thinkers have never properly challenged, decommissioned, properly coordinated. We might have made it as unthinkable as Foucault made it. Foucault, after all, made the very unthinkability of death core to understanding what it was to be alive at all. But in making it unthinkable, we just make it more likely and refuse to think it. And that is certainly true, I've always felt, for global collapse. We think of it as a problem in other lands, or a problem in other years. We report it then as if it was an event that was sweeping up other people's lives, was an utter tragedy, but was somehow removed from us, unthinkable in our day-to-day life. And yet it is the event of our life. It is what we are doing. It is the way we are using our technology, the way we are not challenging our government, the way we are not thinking about our world. I remember, I've talked about this before, 7 years ago, was it? 7, 8 years ago? Extinction Rebellion, when we felt we were going to change the world and render this unthinkability itself unthinkable. But all it took was COVID. So all it took was a year when people weren't thinking about the environment. And that sheer miasma of unthinkability was back, and it was very hard to motivate anyone ever again. Because it has become the great mantra. By rendering things unthinkable, we think we can make them not happen. And yes, it is that unthinkability that makes it happen at all. That makes it possible to be destroying a planet from within. To see the effect of that destruction. To be caught in wildfires. To be caught in a world where the Arctic is collapsing. And to see it only as a mining opportunity. To live in a world where oil stocks are increasing. Where people would just say, all we need to do really is just to deny this global warming thing and it will just go away. All that stuff. All that rendering it unthinkable. As if the unthinkable could never happen. That, of course, was the lesson of the Holocaust. The unthinkable happened because it was unthinkable. And until we start to really try and not just think the unthinkable in ourselves, but like Foucault communicated, to try to get other people to get excited to thinking about it, thinking about where they are, not in terms of them, but in terms of the ripples and the reflections, the refractions they have across the world, we ain't going to solve that. And for whatever reason, and I could give you hundreds, I've got millions of excuses up my back door to make to St. Peter at the end. we never did that as a generation. We never really learned the lesson the Holocaust was meant to be teaching us. We certainly never passed it on. And the unthinkable stalks our life. And God knows it is about to break through.